Okay, so the first thing I did was I pleated this, or I did this by hand, cut this by hand. Uh, so on the first thing I did was I sewed together, I ironed it, and and then sewed the edge on the bottoms. This is the bottom, and then these are the top. So the bottom is the pattern that is the original pattern that has not been altered at all because there's no real bending that goes on. It's just the bending around. You want, I definitely want this line to measure correctly. So this line is 23 and a half. I shrunk it down a little bit. I'm adding more material on the ends here to make up for it, the curve. When this curves around, it takes up material, of course. So the big problem that I've encountered so far is getting these two together because this is a double-sided adhesive, a melt into. So what I'm doing is I'm stay stitching. I'm going to stay stitch these into place with the curve in already in, so that I won't be making any mistakes when I iron it in. So this is my double-sided fusible interface. I cut it shorter than the pattern because, and then also I cut it down here, some excess off of here for the brim, because it folds around on here and it gives some excess material. So the idea is that when this curves around, it takes up excess space, and that's the idea behind the pattern. So I tacked the back of this interface onto this top side of the back already, and then I'm ready to sew these together. I actually should have sewn these together ahead of time. I wasn't sure what to do, so I changed my mind. I'm going to add a little extra length here on the ends to make up for the amount that it takes to wrap around the top. So I got this double-sided fusible tacked in place around the edges. I joined these pieces together and found out that it was too wide, so I had to bring these together a little closer. Yeah, so when I join these pieces together and I run my fingers around the edge to see how it measures out, it should all come together. It should come together correctly, and now it does. So I'm going to stitch them together. I'm going to stitch these pieces together. On these pieces that go on the top of the hat, I attached just a single-sided fusible on here to give it a little structure, a little more structure, and then here I'm going to do cuts, and it's going to... Here's what I did when I ironed these fusibles on this interface. I did it on the rounded edge of this ironing board, and so I got a curve. I got the natural curve that this top hat part of the hat is going to have. There, so it naturally wants to set up and curve. So it looks more natural. So before I joined these, I pinned them together just to make sure that the dimension came out right, that the measurements came out right, that both of these would join together without too much of a difference. As you can see, when I trim these edges, when I cut these edges, I cut just a little too close to the edge, or I didn't fold it far enough. So I have to come back with a needle and hand stitch those sharp looking edges because they don't look quite right when you can see they're sticking out. I have register marks so everything lines up right. So that's where I use those marks, and then these sides so that everything will line up right. So now after I get these little fluffy bits tucked in, then I'm going to sew around the edge. I'm going to go once around, and then I'm going to iron this fusible together. There, I went twice around on the edge of the brim. The first one I did just to get the pieces lined up to match them up. Then the second go round I did on the very edge, and that really cements these two pieces really close together. And then I did one stitch up the side, one back and forth up the side, and now I've measured off some 1/4 inch measure marks, and I'm going to sew around the brim and do my final stitching, and then this will finally be done. I've already ironed it. Here it is. I've sewn these all together. I've gone up the sides. I've gone straight up when I came in on the curve. I took that excess off. These sides are joined together with that same little curve. I pressed it with spray starch. I've got these marks for center and back, front. So there's a center mark. Using that, I went around, all the way around. I got my measurement. I transferred that measurement. This is the old pattern from the old hat, and this is because this hat has 9 cuts in it on one side. I want to save this piece because I'll be making that other hat again. I made it to preserve it. To make my new pattern, I took a piece of tracing paper, and then I just laid it on the old pattern, traced around. When you do this, you only actually have to do 1/2 of it. When you finally get the right curve drawn out, you can fold it over, you get your pattern. This will be the new pattern. So this is what happened with my original pattern. It is here on this outside line. This is my original pattern, which was this. I found out that by pinning it, by using the pins, I pinned around on this line to make it fit, and found out that it didn't fit, so I had to bring the line in about 1/4 inch. So that's where I have to make my adjustment. I'm going to make my adjustment on my original pattern using using a compass, and then drawing this line around and subtracting that from my original pattern, and that's what I'll do later on. I will finish that. So after I found my original, after I found the correct line here, then I did a basting stitch to put these two pieces together, and then when I'm done doing that, I will take the pins out and then sew it. So for the inside of my brim, I have to have a cushiony headband of some sort. So that's what I did. I grabbed a scrap piece of salvage, piece of fabric that I cut up, a garment that I cut up. So I always save your fabric because it can be used later on for stuff. Or you could use a sweatpants or anything like that. Try it on first, though. After you do your cuts, you want to leave a little bit of, don't want to cut it all the way. You want to leave just a little bit of extra fabric there, that so it doesn't show. You don't want it to. So this is probably the easiest part of doing this hat, is doing this, pinning this together, and then after you sew it, you just flip it over, and you'll see that when I'm done. Here you can see I've got it pinned up along this line on the bottom, and then want to sew it on the inside, and be careful when you go around that you don't catch this side of it. You got to cut pretty close into under there. I hand roll it across the pins so I don't break my needle. Well, there it is with the top. I went twice around and then I rolled the edge over. I really didn't have this stuff is too thick. I broke a couple needles on it. I had to actually hand turn the sewing machine to get this. But this, I just folded this over. That's the only way that I could deal with it. And since this is there's no lining in this hat, so that's as good as I could make it look. And then I put the hat band on, which is the second easiest stitch. And in the back, you make a notch. It's pretty easy to find the center, and then you can get these close enough together as you want. And this is, if you don't sew this together, sew it shut, what you can do is keep this open and run a cord or something throughout here, and then you can tie your hat down if it's too loose. So this is the end of it. I've got front and back marked on these so I know which is which. I don't have to guess which side is what. And then this is the back where the notch is, so I know I just put the front. I'll take this excess material and that's here on the outside where the lining is on the inside, and then this fits right in between here, this pocket of the hat band and the hat. And I just pin it together and then sew it, and then the hat's done. That's the end of it. And there it is. It's going to look something like that. The hat's done. After I sew it, it'll be, hopefully the pieces are fit together correctly. Anyways, there's the latest design of the hat and the latest version. We'll see what the next one turns out to be. That's it.